Arina be a chair, everyone else is a trainee or a spectator. Okay, so you have NUSB, out Marabi, the motion that this House would prohibit the release of previously unpublished artistic works after the death of the creator of the or artist. I'd like to call upon the Prime Minister.
Right, a bit different. Madam Chair, we believe that when a person is deceased, what we will do as a law is to be able to protect that person's interest as far as we possibly could. We believe the debate isn't about the instances in which the proprietary interest was obviously explicitly given perhaps to a family member or to like a company member or some friend or something like that with explicit instructions or where perhaps the amount of funds or profits would be received and who will be directed to. We think this is a debate about instances when the intentions of the artist was unknown. When perhaps tearing down his house, he found some locked cabinet somewhere of all his unpublished manuscripts. Or perhaps, even in the instances of, say, Heath Ledger and Michael Jackson, in which they died suddenly, perhaps even violently, and we honestly don't know what they wanted at the end of the day, right? Three things I'm talking about within my speech. Firstly, on preserving the legacies of these artists. Secondly, how we want to prevent theft post-mortem. And thirdly, the question of whether or not artists owe a duty to the public. So on the first point, like on the preservation of the legacies of these artists. So we first have to question, what are these artists like? And we, as a drama student myself, we all know that artists tend to be a little anal about the ways in which, about their work, for instance, and tend to be extremely caught up about the way in which they basically want to, the kinds of work that which they want to present to the public, as well as the public image and the ways that which they want to present themselves to society. I think they tend to be extremely fastidious about these things. We think even more so if you were someone extremely famous, because you would be thinking, what kind of a legacy and how would I like to be remembered 50 years down the road? No thanks. So look at the question, right? What happens with post-mortem work published in status quo? We think largely this work tends to be romanticized to a great extent, especially if the person died an extremely sudden or violent death, right? We think what basically happens, as with the case of Heath Ledger's unfortunate demise after the case, or after he played Joker within the Dark Knight Rises, right? We think what basically happened was that what happens is that your work and your death ends up being sensationalized and without any kind of consent, without any kind of possible crowd control, because obviously you are dead, right? We think that basically, we think that basically what happens is that this work, the image that which you want to publish, obviously spirals, perhaps most probably out of what you initially intended yourself to be seen as or yourself to be portrayed as, right? And we think under these circumstances, we might on the side of caution. We think that basically, even in the instances of Heath Ledger or Michael Jackson, in which they were working extremely hard to be able to put up a certain kind of performances on screen for their fans or for their audiences, we think under these circumstances, we still can't extrapolate whether or not they wanted that final piece of work to be published, right? Because we think that, you know, even when Michael Jackson said he wanted to do all those music videos and things like that, he still has a hand in the final process or the final editing process, right? He still has a final say or looking at the final piece of work and giving a yay or nay or whether or not he wants his fans to see him and remember him as such. We think under these circumstances, that's why we don't know. We really don't know how would they have reacted to this work. We think it's difficult to prove how this person would act, and therefore we would like to err on that side of caution and not publish it. Shafiq.
Would you allow family members or otherwise, or other individuals within society to write a book about this person without that person's consent?
We think that's okay, right? Like writing biographies are perfectly okay, because we think whenever we read biographies, we do take them with a pinch of salt, right? Because we do know that person never really played, especially if it's a biography is written post-mortem, that person never really played a part in the creation of that work. So yeah, we don't really see how that falls into it. Point two, how the prevention of theft, right? And this we think is the major crux of today's debate. We basically believe that theft is extremely likely to happen when the creator is not around to ensure that his work and the profits go the way that he wants it to go, right? Within the status quo, we basically don't want others to benefit of the legacies of individuals. In the way that we already have plenty of laws out there to prevent grave robbing as well as the robbing of the deceased, we respect, the law strives to protect the propriety of the dead, right? And we basically don't believe individuals should profit on others, especially when no express permission was given. So who publishes these works? We think A, it's usually your family members. B, it tends to be your collaborators, like whatever music company that which you are signed on to, and things like that. We think therefore it's far too easy for these undeserving individuals to gain from the death of these artists, right? Even if we think that the best of these intentions of the artists are at heart. But why do we think theft will happen? We think the way that the status quo, the way that copyright laws are worked, and the way that copyright laws are given, are so that we give some sort of autonomy towards an artist. But copyright laws are premised on the basis that the artist is alive and well, and is only able to make use of copyright laws when he's able to persecute other individuals or companies within court, right? We think that once you're dead, we are not able to do such a thing. You are unable to protect your own interests, and therefore we think that the law should protect your interests for you by basically preventing everybody from having any kind of access to your work, or unable to not be able to not make sure they can't meddle with the way that which you have basically striven to be able to live your life or to be remembered. But thirdly, and most importantly, whether or not artists really owe a duty to the public. And this is where I really expect, especially Rafiq with his knowledge on rock and roll, to come up and say the music world perhaps would be a far less colourful world without perhaps the works of these people published post-mortem, right? Okay, we think that most laws work today by balancing individual interests and public interests, right? And this is what we're going to argue. There is no public interest in the public knowing the works of these deceased artists, right? Because we think that firstly, if they're so popular, they maybe already had a wealth of kinds of music and art by which they've already left a very fairly solid and rich legacy behind. But more importantly, we basically think that if this piece of work was so important, that will so dominate the field over the next few years, rather it not be there so other artists don't have to live in the shadow of another giant forever and they don't dominate the field post-mortem, especially when it's going to happen if that piece of work is going to be sensationalized more than perhaps its objective artistic work, right? We think that basically the blind increasement of the quantity of artwork is not necessarily what is best for art, not necessarily what is best for the public, because we'd rather stick with protecting individual interests because we think it's far less ambiguous a circumstance. We'd much rather just go with protecting the interests of the individual. For these reasons, go with that one.
There you go.
Alright, thank you very much. Now I'd like to invite the Leader of Opposition to please.
Well, the intention of the creator of that art is unclear, as they say, and it is equally as probable that he intended for publication to happen sometime in the future. That government believes, this side of the government believes in the side of allowing options and the ability for the next of kin to make that judgment call. On that side of the house, the government is making a blanket choice for everyone, even though they're underpinning the motion that we don't know what kind of choices these artists would like to make, irrespective of the kind of realities, considerations, and the legacy of these artists. And we think that is the worst alternative to status quo beyond having that option, which is making that choice for everyone. We think that's morally unconscionable. Madam Chair, what is the side of opposition support? We believe in two things. Firstly, we believe in transferring the ownership of property to the next of kin. So like they said, if there are wills and inheritance law, then the right people will get it. But if they die intestate, there are distribution acts and inheritance acts that determines who is the rightful proprietor of that property. And we think that has always been done in centuries to determine who deserves to own that property. But secondly, if the creator intended for that specific artwork to not be transferred ownership and to never be published, subsequent to this death, we think they are able to expressly denote that absence of consent within wills. We think our legal framework will respect that and ensure that those materials will receive protection from being published. Madam Chair. We think this debate is whether or not the choice of the beneficiaries to publish it should exist, and if there are some legitimate benefits to it, this time the government should allow the binary of choices on whether or not to not publish it or to publish it, Madam Chair. And that's the debate. So before I go on to the substantives, a few levels of rebuttal. First rebuttal, on the idea of preserving legacy, we have two responses. Number one, we agree that quality control would be a value that is undermined. But we think if the creator had the ability to decide between publishing the unfinished work or to not publish it at all and deprive his entire legacy of that publication, on the balance of probabilities, we're willing to say that most artists would choose to release it, because that is the entire objective of making that piece of art, so that it will find its way to this public eye and receive social appreciation for that value. So although we undermine that quality control would be a harm, in that binary of choice, they are required to defend to you why prohibition is the preferable alternative or the solution in the absence of choices. We think because we're absent of choices, we need to allow a larger discrepancy to determine who should decide within this context and within the next of kin will be a better arbiter to those choices. The second response, she said this will also create a centralization of the creator's death and etc. We think this is an absolute blessing in disguise. We think it creates the necessary social attention that increases the appreciation of the artwork and legacy of these individuals. Vincent van Gogh never sold a single painting during his lifetime, but he's taking all of his paintings to his girlfriend, who then decided to publish it and make him the kind of artist and the kind of legacy that we know him as of now. We think if there are great pressures for them to release it right now, and therefore undermine quality control, they are also operating under the presumption that all companies and next of kin are definitely all profit-oriented and do not have any single amounts of consideration as to the legacy of this artist. We think these individuals are most acute at making those considerations and taking those judgment calls on behalf of these artists, and they are best able to make those kinds of decisions. Second rebuttal, she talked about preventing theft. They aren't sure if the right people are profiting from these sales. But that's what strong legal frameworks are for. We need to make sure that the people who own it now after the death are legally owning it and deserve to own it. If you want to see things like they didn't deserve to enjoy the profits from those arts, that literally applies to all other property. I bought my house. My little brother didn't own that house, Madam Chair, but after I die, someone has to receive it and someone has to enjoy from it. The alternative is it being as good as non-existent, and we don't see why that's particularly a benefit under your side of the world. We think they understand that the next of kin is deserving, especially when the wills exist, deserve to enjoy those profits, and we think that applies to all properties. We can introduce stronger legal frameworks to ensure that the right people are the beneficiaries of those properties. Thirdly, she argued duty to the public. She thinks the manner in which it is expressed is not within the consent of these artists. I'm going to directly clash with this by arguing to you why there is a duty to preserve the legacy of these artists by releasing these works, and Shaki will further argue to you why there are a duty to fans in a semblance of extent, and considering that these are all legitimate benefits, therefore a binary of choice must exist within these circumstances. What will I argue to you? I'm going to tell you why transfer of ownership is legitimate, and in most cases, it is the better choice as opposed to state prohibition, and then I'll move on to telling you why a complete legacy of the artist is always a preferable outcome than an incomplete one. But before that, yes.
Now, do you believe that other individuals who are not next of kin of the deceased artists should benefit to profit from the works of these deceased artists?
We think when there are gray areas as to who should own it and who should profit from it, we think that's what the judiciary is for, to resolve those competing interests. In a lot of cases, the company that they're collaborating in also have an interest, and therefore they're able to claim that interest, Madam Chair. It's called equity. So these things can be resolved in a fair and neutral manner. We think there are avenues for legal redressal to determine that. That is just a technicality that doesn't undermine the fact that some actors beyond the state actually own those properties as well. 3 levels on ownership. Number 1, why does the transfer of ownership happen? We think autonomy must be transferred to those in closest proximity because it underlines the presumption that these individuals have the best understanding of the life that these artists have had. They have real proximity, so even if legal proximity doesn't reflect real proximity, that proxy reflects that he has access to the artist's girlfriend, social circles, and understands the intentions of this individual. Considering that death is unforeseeable, we can never determine whether or not the artist had the full intention to even release it. Because what could be the possible reasons for non-publication? It cannot just all be because they just didn't want to release it. It could have been like they needed more time, needed more edits. They wanted to publish it all along. There's a massive avenue of circumstances in which we can interpret this intention, and the best party to make that arbitration is the party closest to that individual. But secondly, no one in death owns anything, because without the ability to manage that property, it is rendered non-existent in real life, and your artwork has absolutely no value. Which is why people with mental health issues or mental incapacity, even if you have property, you don't have a individual. Each artist's life is inextricably linked to the company, to their dependents, and they deserve those financial contributions, like how the artists would have intended that money to go to them anyways. Lastly, complete legacy. There's no such thing as tarnishing the legacy of an artist because the interpretation of art is inherently subjective. So even if there are dark spots, those are dark spots that define the lives of these artists and define who she is as an individual, and we bring better understanding and better appreciation of how she wanted to present herself to society. That is a better legacy than one where we had no knowledge of how she intended to complete her legacy in the long run. For all of these reasons, there are legitimate benefits to making the decision to release it. Therefore, it should not be a blanket choice that the government makes for every individual.
Thank you very much. I'd like to invite you to be back.
Ladies and gentlemen, I know that it's important to protect the next of kin, but I'm going to say that they are already very well protected. For many of these very famous artists, and that is why there's a lot of interest that generated for them, during their lifetime, they already have published many pieces of work. And in fact, they have copyrighted these pieces of work, and that they are able to transfer the proceeds of these transactions into to the next of kin out there. The reason why, if this piece of work is unpublished, it cannot be used as a transactional tool as this, because we recognize that individuals have the right to say that they want to abandon something that they have already started. And this is a principle that is applicable during the lifetime of an individual. Because if you think about it, for a very famous artist, there is always this pressure for him to create something, to sell it, and to bring revenue. In fact, the next of kin may actively pressure this guy to do so. But during the lifetime, this individual can very well say, no, my perfectionist attitude is more important. My reputation is more important. And the state recognizes it because this individual will not publish, there's no one that you can pressure them to do so. Why is it that if we think of this like this while this guy is living, we automatically change the perception of an individual as well as artistic license when he's dead? An argument that has no analysis out there, other than the next of kin can benefit more. Of course they can benefit more. There's not something that we can argue against. But we're saying that they are benefiting in an unjustified manner. The second thing that they say is this, is that look, this is a 50-50 thing. Because it's unfinished, it might have been something that this person was quite satisfied with. But ladies and gentlemen, this is again a balance of probability. Given that most individuals want the right to, or actually most of the time they have the right to have the final editing process whereby they can look at this particular thing, and many of them do make last-minute reversals that says that I'm just not satisfied. Yes, from a bystander point of view, this may seem like a big piece of waste, that you can say that he just needed to edit it a bit, or he could have published it unpublished. I mean, he could have published this incomplete work, and people will still be okay with it. But for that individual, he said, no, I don't want to do so. And in fact, we actually benefited from this, right? Because most of these people, because they want to leave a good legacy, they want to upkeep a high reputation, they are able to keep their performances at such a high level, and we are the direct benefiters of such a situation out there. But the final thing that they talk about is this, is that the definition of ownership is that people who are close to you will benefit from that. And we say that is true if this piece of product has already been in transaction. I.e., just as how I buy a house and then I'm able to pass it over to my next of kin, that's because I have already published my work. This has already been bought by someone else. There's already a financial transaction, and now this becomes part of my individual work. And that's how, when I pass away, someone else can benefit from it. But this is different when this individual has not yet consented to putting everything in motion, right, to publish this particular piece of work. Go ahead.
Sir, when a person dies without a will, the state gives that estate to the next of kin of the employers or whoever deserves it. Why is normal property different from intellectual property?
You know, firstly, that this piece of work will often be copyrighted. Secondly, unpublished pieces of work are often not going to be so easily copyrighted out there because we do not know the boundaries as to how much completed this piece of work there is. And thirdly, because often individuals, before they die and when they apply for certain copyrights, they are able to determine how they are going to maximize the maximum utility of this particular work. But all these things are absent because this individual has died. Everything is left to a game of probability out there. That is the difference that we are talking about. So ladies and gentlemen, in a summary to my rebuttals is this, is that as a next of kin of a very famous individual, you have benefited in so many ways because this person has partaken in this transaction, he has earned so much revenue, you benefited while this guy is alive, and you benefited a lot more when this person has passed away. And that's why we say there's no need for your particular policy. Let's move on to my main point of substantive. Well, how is this going to impact the rest of the artistic scene? Something that Natalie talked about. Honestly speaking, there is really no counterfactual. It's very difficult to say that we really benefited because Heath Ledger came about. Because for every Heath Ledger, there are also many unpublished pieces of work that cause a lot of people to be upset. Because there is this preponderance or this intrigue as to maybe this piece of work might be his very best. Maybe this piece of work is something that he meant most honestly. So all these kind of things, and they mentioned earlier, they say that, look, this sensationalism is good, but to what end, ladies and gentlemen, that's the question that we ask ourselves. And we are able to argue that no, sorry, this is 5 minutes, okay? This is not a good thing that we are arguing for. Why do I say so? Because an individual will have lost complete control of this particular piece of work. And this is very different from the Vincent van Gogh example, and I'm going to do the weighing up over here. Firstly, he tried to sell that piece of work, which means that he already wanted to publish it, just that no one wanted to buy it, and that's why it was given to someone else. But this is very different if this piece of work he has only finished it to like 3/4 or even 4/5 to an extent out there, because he has not managed to have his final stamp of approval to say that I have finished with this, this is my interpretation of these particular art pieces, no one else can add anything to it. And secondly, we say that often this sensationalism will not just lead to biographies, but it's going to lead to biographies that are able to put into pieces, bits and pieces of this unpublished piece of work. And the reason why we answer in the POI that a biography versus this mishmash of work or this summary series is different is this, because a biography, everyone will still think that this is someone else's interpretation. This guy probably have not signed at the end of this biography as to prove it. But for these kinds of mismatch of these pieces of work, people will add some legitimacy to it, right? Because after all, it's still bits and pieces of this person's piece of work out there. And based on the branding, based on the legacy of this, people will start to debate as to whether or not this is something that is good. And often this becomes a distraction to a lot of people out there. Firstly, we argue that this individual lost control of a piece of work. You have respected it while he was alive, but why is it that we make an exception right now? And secondly, we say that this is going to cause a lot of intrigue and romanticization within society that makes it difficult for individuals to, for new fans to leave out of this particular preponderance out there. The final piece of analysis I want to say is this, is that when it comes to weighing public interest versus private interest, why is it that we are on the side of the private interest? Because on the side of the public interest, these people have really benefited us in so many ways when they consented to this transaction whereby they publish these particular pieces of work. We have already benefited because they have always upheld a very high standard. Now is the time to us to protect these individuals, because to them, their legacy is everything, their professionalist trait is everything, and that's why we are on the side of individuals.
Alright, thank you very much. Now I'd like to invite the Deputy Officer.
Madam Chair, this debate is about the choice of beneficiary to publish the works of the deceased, ladies and gentlemen, and whether or not that choice can be circumvented. And we think up to this point in the debate, the side of affirmative haven't provided a line in which that prohibition can be drawn, ladies and gentlemen. Let's first look at why is there the right for family members in order to do whatever they want or publish these works? We give you 4 reasons. Number 1, it is sometimes done in order to forward their father's legacy. That is why in certain instances where your father dies or your mother dies, we don't stop individuals, family members, from writing a eulogy or giving a speech about their father at the funeral. Or we don't stop people from writing a book or biography about that individual, ladies and gentlemen. That was the point of information I raised, and there was an important concession that was made by Natalie, ladies and gentlemen. She said that because it is made by someone else, despite the fact that you don't get the consent of the deceased, then people will know and take it with a pinch of salt, ladies and gentlemen. That concedes that the manner in which people digest works that are released without the consent of the deceased, ladies and gentlemen, is subjective. Why won't people take previously unpublished works of the deceased with a pinch of salt, knowing the fact, ladies and gentlemen, knowing the fact that the deceased wasn't involved in the final editing process, knowing the fact that the deceased may not have intended for the work to be represented in that manner. So, ladies and gentlemen, now that we have recognized there are different degrees in which society will digest this expression, we don't know where do they draw the line for prohibition. Because all they said is that the legacy must be protected. And if people perceive it negatively, it is unfair for the deceased because it's not, because that person didn't consent to it. But we allow all other things as well, ladies and gentlemen. For example, just like inheritance, if you get a house from your father, you can do whatever you want with that house. If that house is tied back to your father, ladies and gentlemen, despite the fact that your father didn't want that house to be used in a certain manner, despite the fact that your father didn't want you to use the millions of dollars to gamble in Vegas, ladies and gentlemen, as his objective, you can't prohibit a person from practicing that right because there's no other person, that should take ownership over that property, ladies and gentlemen. Secondly, we tell you that it is important to recognize that family members also can publish these things for profit in order to maintain themselves. That is why we have maintenance laws in which if a person dies intestate, you are supposed some portion of the property goes to the wife and children for them to live. But thirdly, we think this is important sometimes for self-defense of family members. Some artists may die with a negative perception in existence within society. Like Michael Jackson, people still remember him for being a pedophile, for example, ladies and gentlemen. Sometimes his unpublished works are expression of the journeys and tribulations that he was going through that may draw links of why he was acting in a certain manner that could repair his image and reputation within society, which forwards his legacy, but also allows family members to defend themselves against scrutiny and discrimination from society, ladies and gentlemen. We think family members have that right. But lastly, we think family members should have that right by virtue of proximity, ladies and gentlemen. There's no one else that understands the intentions of the disease except people that are close to them. That is why in instances where a family member is going through a medical procedure, we allow the spouse or the father of a child, ladies and gentlemen, to make medical decision for that person because that person understands best of what is best for that person. For all of these 4 reasons, we think only family members should have the choice to do whatever they want with these works, ladies and gentlemen, because the harm, there's no harm. The person is dead, right? Even if it's bad image on that person, how is that person going to undergo or feel that bad image within society?
Okay.
Do you know that that person is a ghost and looking at society on how people are talking about him? We don't see how you can't perceive it with your senses, ladies and gentlemen, of how the person feels.
Okay.
And that is why, ladies and gentlemen, on the second principle question, we think there needs to be a presumption of transfer to beneficiary and a presumption of allowance for publication. For 4 reasons. This is important, Marvin. It is a principal argument on why there must be a presumption of allowance to publish in instances where there is a grey area. Firstly, the fact that he recorded it or written a draft, ladies and gentlemen, shows that he had the intention to release it at some point. Even if, because we're not talking about personal diaries here. Secondly, the fact that he did not personally and actively write down in his will that he didn't want to publish it, ladies and gentlemen, shows that there is an implied consent on, the ability for family members to publish it. Because if it is so important for people, for that work to not be published, ladies and gentlemen, we think he would have taken an initiative to explicitly and actively write it down on his will. Thirdly, we think by virtue of your duty to your fans, because, ladies and gentlemen, we have to recognize that artists are a form of support system for their fans, are role models and provide inspiration for their fans, provide escapism and support system for their fans. If, ladies and gentlemen, you are in a position like that, we think that there should be a presumption of allowance to allow your fans to benefit from this. Yes, Marvin.
Why is it that when a person is giving consent taking is explicit and we really want to make sure there's informed consent, but the moment is vague consent becomes implicit and so on and so forth?
Then it works on other areas as well, ladies and gentlemen, like the book that I talked about. Like, for example, ladies and gentlemen, when you create a song and you have a publication or publishing house, for example, a production house, your rights transfers to that production house. Even after you die, ladies and gentlemen, the production house gets to use your song in movies that you couldn't conceive will happen in the future. For example, ladies and gentlemen, you don't stop these people from using your works because the right has already transferred. Even if people perceive that work as negative to that person, the scrutiny or negative perception goes to the publication house or goes to the family members that publish it, and they are in existence within the world and in a position to defend themselves against this negative perception that is given to them, ladies and gentlemen. So at the end of this debate, we have to recognize that at the end of the day, it is property law. It is someone having property, and that property is, when that person is dead, should be transferred to his next of kin. The next of kin is allowed to do whatever they want for the principal reasons that I've told you in terms of maintenance, in terms of profit, ladies and gentlemen. And just like other property, ladies and gentlemen, we think there shouldn't be a blanket prohibition and everything should be analyzed on a case-by-case basis. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now let's invite government.
Ironically, there are some things that do have blanket prohibitions when it comes to intestacy laws. For individuals who hold public office or public property, these things remain or go back to the state upon death, and individuals have absolutely no claim, even if they're the next of kin. So first of all, the legal principles that David lied to us about are fundamentally untrue. There are two things we need to analyze in this debate. First, is there a legal necessity to publish or prohibit these particular things? And second, and perhaps more importantly, is there a public necessity to do so in light or against private interests that we in opposition are trying to confirm to? First, is there a legal necessity to publish or prohibit? The starting point of this, Madam Chair, is that ironically, even though Mai says that there's nothing to lose when you are dead, even the opposition respects that there are some things that we do want to cherish and some things we want to hold on to. It's the only reason why we protect and even care about wills, even though individuals are dead. Because by her logic, we shouldn't care about wills because the private interest in individuals extinguish when they are dead. So we've all agreed on this. The question to this is that
when the person wrote the will, he was alive. That's why we have to respect his wishes. As compared to not having any clause and assuming that he didn't want to publish. Sure. That is extremely different.
No, sure, I agree. I mean, I'll just clarify, right? I'm not protesting that logic anymore. So back to the point. What was our underlying principle in this debate, Madam Chair? What we told you is that short of explicit conveyance of property between one individual to another, the state or anyone else should not be able to second guess what these particular intentions of the artist is, because we have no ability to do so. What Shafiq said in the speech is that there's an implied condition and clause that these individuals would like these things to be continued into the future, because it was so important they would have said that they didn't want these things to be continued in the future. The problem is this. When an artist spends years and months and much of his time dedicated to a particular action or publication, his often intention is in creating his work doesn't usually take into account his death. And that is a major consideration in this part, especially when it comes to artistic works. Because if I knew what the expiration date of my life would be, no thank you, I might reshape the way in which this particular artistic work might be created so I could finish it on time. That is why any publication of work of art never takes into account the death of a particular individual. Consequently, it is impossible for us to understand or predict or guess as to what that person would have considered if he knew about the death, about the impending death. Consequently, you can't say that there is an implied condition in term that these individuals wanted something to happen when they actually didn't predict that thing for happening in the first place. So that is why, conceptually speaking, what they are trying to lie to about just doesn't make sense. If an artist himself didn't consider the death of this individual vis-a-vis his work, how can they say that there is an implied consideration that they did? And that's why, to start with, we cannot second guess these particular things. And that's the core principle that we talked to you about first of all, that they never doubted. What did they say? A few things. First, Mai said, and that was continued by Shafiq, that the entire intention of these individuals is to publish their particular works because they are artists. That is untrue. The first and last barrier to any artist is quality as opposed to publication, because their legacy, even in death, is what really makes or breaks them. No, that many artists who ask them would rather not publish substandard work as opposed to just publicating them for the sake of publishing them. That is why the entirety of the principles supporting this argument is a fallacy. But secondly, Shafiq said, but look at biographies, they're the same exact thing. No, they're not. Because the authors of these particular things are completely different. So there are three things that we know are true. The author is clear, the law in regards to these things are clear. Because the person creating these things is the writer of their biography, and by law, we can't stop these people creating these particular works. But third and last of all, thank you, it is also clear that in regards to biographies, estates of individuals to which the biography is written about can sue them for things that are misrepresented. In this case, it is entirely different, given that we first of all don't know the intentions of these individuals, such that we could potentially protect them as well. But the last thing they said, and the key part of their case, but look at all other property, right? All other property without any intention goes directly to the next of kin. I've already told you that that's not really the case, and here's why. Because there are three things we have to say in response. First of all, if it was such importance to them, they would exactly have said that they want to leave this possession with the next of kin. Therefore, it is more likely when they don't, that they don't want it to be left to the next kin if it's so important as they said. Second, no, thank you. Unlike property, the creation of work and artistic things are not designed for your future dependence, because these things will have inherent ability for people to maximize them in the same way you would have. And that's why we think this is fundamentally different from property. But third and last of all, when it comes to property, interestingly enough, much of the intention by people who are living often includes individuals who continue to succeed them in the future. That is why when you sign up for property, the names of your dependents are put into that list so that I know who might likely succeed you in the future. That is why when it comes to property, when these things are unsure, third parties are able to attest even the next of kin for possession of that exact property as well. That is why these things are entirely conceptually different, even within the realms of law. When these things are so when these things are so ambiguous, our intention is this. When we can't tell, it's important, therefore, that we respect the last, most likely wishes is that these things should remain mysterious and should remain mystery to everyone, including the next of kin, in order to preserve that legacy of that person. That is why, on the basis of private interest, we think we win the legal battle. No thanks. Second of all, is there a public interest in allowing these things to continue to be published? A few things to this. The first, or one of the two things we said at the very beginning, is first of all, that we allow other artists to shine through. That we don't want individuals to continue living the legacies of other individuals to the extent that they can never provide the new kinds of direction, new kinds of grounds within these artistic areas. No response to this point. Second of all, we also told you that over-romanticization of particular things means that we often disregard the bigger stories behind these particular actors and artists as well. They said that any kind of increase in social tension is good, and perhaps we are able to do this in the future. Sometimes we may repair the legacies and such. Sure, but what if it doesn't? And that's the concern that we really want to know. If we left it at that, if we didn't continue these legacies, the best and the worst case scenario is that we think back about what these people left behind. And that's how we thought about the legacies or the careers or the lives of people like Elvis Presley, Kurt Cobain, and the kinds of struggles they went through. And to really think about why they went through these struggles, because we weren't caught up with analyzing how good or bad the music they left behind really was. And this is the true value here. Because the moment you allow other people to take over this music, it only takes one particular trajectory, as Stephanie said. You want to romanticize the past. You want to romanticize and spend particular attention to make sure that these individuals are remembered in their glory. We're not realizing this being of the things that they really want. And as long as we keep ourselves in these particular realms, we can't truly analyze the stories behind individuals. We can't truly analyze the stories behind celebrities and other artists alike. And we think that is a public value that we bring forward on that basis. Both from private and public interest, to see and show you why it's important this policy must stand. That is why we propose.
Madam Chair, we believe that artistic expression, whether they be made by authors or artists or writers, are self-extensions of their own identity. And a person's self-extensions are essentially intellectual property, and intellectual property, Madam Chair, can transfer ownership just like any other sorts of property can. The fundamental flaw of the government side's case in today's debate worked on the assumption that all posthumous artistic works that are published by next of kin or by record studios or by book publishers will always seek to harm the reputation or the past romanticism of the artists that we are talking about. All their analysis seems to point to the presumption that all the published work or all the unpublished works that the artist kept will somehow harm its reputation or will somehow harm the ability of people to appreciate his past works, Madam Chair, and I'll speak to you about how that is simply not the case in my speech. In my speech today, I'm talking about two big issues. Firstly, should we allow in the absence of a written will, should we allow beneficiaries to publish? Secondly, can we imply consent or should we deny consent? Thirdly, what's best for society and the arts? Let's get straight to it. Should we allow beneficiaries to publish in the absence of a will? The government team, from Natalie's speech in today's debate, Natalie came out and said artists are really anal. But let's not take that argument as it is. Let's build it a bit forward. Essentially, she's saying that the work of artists define who they are, and artists need to be in full control of that reputation. We told you from our position that when a person dies without a will, his estate or his property is transferred to their beneficiaries. Even without a will, the state assumes these things. So artistic works and intellectual property is still property and can be transferred. When artists die, royalties go to their families. When Steve Jobs dies, his pension goes to his wife and his children. We think it was morally inconsistent for them to say that why these forms of property are different from other forms of property. Brian said, well, hang on, when it comes to things like money, we can safely assume that this artist wanted the money to go to his family. But if the way in which that person makes money is through art, then why can't you just by deriving like basic logic that if you can make money from art, why can't we safely assume that at the first place? So then they told you, hang on, there's no consent. So let's deal with the consent part first. So if there's no consent, what can we do? Number one, we say that the state always makes decisions that bring the greater benefit to the greater amount of society. They make utilitarian decisions on people's estates, right? So when a person dies without a will, all of these, the person's estate and properties and monies and cars are given to family members first. They might be given to relatives later. But at the end of the day, the state safely assumes that the person wanted to protect his family. So if we can prove successfully that these sorts of finances can go towards families and beneficiaries and can benefit them, then it's completely in line with the state's ideals to protect family members and next of kin. Families always come first, ladies and gentlemen. Just because a billionaire dies and doesn't leave a will, doesn't mean we burn all his money and throw his cars away or demolish his house, Madam Chair. We transfer them to next of kin. No, not in the reply, please, Brian. Secondly, we said that the idea, and Shafiq told you this, the idea that the artist already worked on these works, we can safely presume that he would have wanted it published anyway. Thirdly, we tell you that when a person dies, that identity and that intellectual property has already transferred to the next of kin anyway. We would allow the next of kin to write biographies, to bury however they want these artists, to say whatever they want about these artists. We think that right has transferred. But fourthly, the state, in the absence of any will, the state also makes decisions that can best benefit the greater amounts of society. So when you die without a will and you don't have any family members or spouses or relatives or employers, then the state will take your money and put it into things like infrastructure, into things like healthcare and medicine. So if we can safely assume that art is a public good and it is good for society, then the state can essentially take all these artistic works and like spread them, into society because it brings some sort of public good. Then the debate evolved. They told you, on the second level, it might tarnish the reputation of these artists. So if we can prove, Madam Chair, that there's no overwhelming harm to these individuals and there's some sort of marginal benefit, then we win this clash as well. So 4 responses to this. Number 1, we tell you that reputation is highly subjective, and and they assume that the harm will always exist and will always harm the artist. But we tell you, Madam Chair, that artistic expression and its impact on society is something that the state cannot and should not regulate. That's why after 1993, the British Museum was not allowed to take down Renaissance and post-impressionist paintings of nude women because, we cannot, judge how people feel about certain artworks, ladies and gentlemen. We cannot gauge how people will view or people will think of this art. We think it's dangerous precedent when a state starts deciding how society will view certain artistic work. We think it's a slippery slope. On that level. Secondly, we tell you that even though the song doesn't do well or the book doesn't sell very well, we think that the harm isn't as overwhelming as they assert to you, because there will always be avid fans and supporters of Michael Jackson, of Tupac Shakur, of Vincent van Gogh, who will defend their artistic works and expressions, in order to counter the sort of negativity that you talked about. But also, fourthly, that sort of harm has to be weighed with the marginal benefit of the kind of financial benefits and support that you provide to these next of kin, to these families who vastly need it. Third response, but before that, yes, Brian.
So if the state doesn't know that the artist's intention was to allow the public to benefit from it, why should next of kin have the ability to monopolize this public benefit?
Because I told you, on one level, we prioritize the next of kin because we can safely assume that they wanted to protect those closest to them. But in the absence of that, then the state can take that work and because it's a public good, then donate it to society. But the third response we had to this idea about harm to reputation is that the state cannot protect a deceased's reputation and can only protect it to a certain extent. Because the harm to a person's reputation only exists if the person is there to experience that defamatory harm. Otherwise, the harm is non-existent, ladies and gentlemen. Because why? Why is that so? In that case, then the state should just rob and take all property of all dead people, because their children or whoever the beneficiaries are might likely or is most potentially likely to misuse those things and harm the legacy of dead individuals. So under your model, you're trying to say that if Steve Jobs left Apple to his son, that you would take Apple away because you're afraid that that might harm the reputation or the past reputation of Steve Jobs. It just doesn't make any sense. We think property can be transferred. Last year also we told you about how this benefits beneficiaries. And they asserted to you very easily in Marvin's speech, that because these people are rock stars, all their family members are well taken care of. That's not the case, ladies and gentlemen. Michael Jackson still has children. He had lots of debt, and his children still have to live on. People like Wolfgang Mozart wrote like 41 symphonies, and he hardly had an audience to any of his piano concerts, ladies and gentlemen. Some of these people only benefit after they die, and we don't think that there's any harm in families finding closure in the death of their loved ones, ladies and gentlemen. At the end of this debate is judged very simply. The question is whether or not the next of kin or beneficiaries can make choices onto the intellectual property of these other people. We've told you that in other forms of property, they already make these choices, so why not with music? Why not with art? We love art, and we're happy to oppose this motion.
Thank you very much. I'd like to invite our
They didn't understand that when they wanted to say they want to protect these artists, they might as well could have just said they wanted to victimize these artists, because the protection is entirely dependent on the original intention of those artists, which we both agree is subjective and it is indeterminate. So if they recognize that there could be a myriad of circumstances where this artist would have wanted to release it in its unfinished glory, because not everyone is a perfectionist, guys, then they are victimizing those artists by preventing the completion of their legacy post-death. But they never wanted to engage with that counter-harm at all. But we engaged with their counter-harm on perfectionists who did not want to release a work without quality. What were the responses that we gave you that didn't hear any comeback? Firstly, we told you that logic applies when they're alive, but with the benefit of hindsight, post-death, and your binary of choice becomes lower quality of work or the entire absence of that work from your entire legacy, within the choice to release it will be more accurately reflective of the will of those very same artists, because the intention when they made it was the intention for society to appreciate it. The second response, we told you, society will understand that these artists had no hand in that final product and understood that the final lack of quality does not define their legacy, the content does. But thirdly, we told you that complete legacies are always preferable, because in artistry, you don't tarnish a legacy because there is a subjectivity to art. So it doesn't have to be the drumming beat of MJ says the song is irregular. It is about the context of those songs, what messages and values that he wanted to propagate that would have been deprived otherwise if you prevented these artworks from being released. So in their principled engagement, we also gave them the largest principle in this debate that they did not want to engage, which is in light of uncertainty, who should be the arbiter of choice, considering both sides don't know what this artist might have wanted. They told you the state, and that the choice must always be a choice to prohibit. But funnily enough, there was zero justifications as to why only the state is able to make these choices, and why on the balance of probabilities, the state always makes the better choices. When we fulfill our counter burden, we told you why the family members are the best people to make these choices in light of those uncertainties. We told you three things. Number one, family members have a bigger onus to use the artwork responsibly. They care about the reputation of the dead, and the state does not. They care about extending the legacy of the loved ones, and the state has no interest to do so. Secondly, they have the largest understanding of the realities undergone by these artists. They know them personally, they knew their intentions, they knew their hurdles. Even if they knew that these people are perfectionists to a fault and would rather die, ironically, rather than release these artworks, those are exactly the kind of families who would take the choice to not release those artworks because they understood who these individual artists are. On your side, it is a blanket prevention that does not respect the individual goals of those artists to a larger extent. But thirdly, we told you the next of kin has an entitlement to that artwork on so many levels. We told you otherwise it is a social waste that is just as good as non-existent. We told you their intention is always to benefit their dependents. We told you it is in the public's interest. And we told you, and most importantly, their debt cannot suffer any harms, whilst all other beneficiaries can benefit from that release. Why on that balance of probabilities, you're unwilling to make that trade-off? I think this side tells you that the benefits outweighs all of the harms. But most importantly, we understand that we might victimize people too, because there's a myriad of circumstances. We don't argue that our case is perfect, but we told you these more choices minimizes the harm of making the wrong call on your side, because you're making the choice for every artist out there. But secondly, we minimize the harm when we let better people make better decisions. We never have any justifications of why these individuals must be under the purview of the state. The most basic underlying presumption on that side of the house is that everyone died ingloriously, and that everyone died gloriously, and therefore all of these artworks will tarnish your reputation. We believe on this side of the house, you will also find people who died ingloriously, and these artworks are the methods of redemption. You're denying these artists the complete legacy that they deserve, and their choices are less respected on your side of the house. For all of these reasons, we are extremely proud to oppose.
Behind the words of assets, intellectual property, and so on and so forth, is the word control. When a person passes away before he publishes a piece of work, it is because he's unable to predict what is going to happen to him. To some extent, he has lost some form of control. But what is important is that if we are a society and we are looking at this individual and we say, well, what is the best way we can maximize your particular control? The question is, should we allow his legacy to be defined by all his completed pieces of work? Pieces of work whereby he had the final editing choice, pieces of work whereby he had the opportunity to make any last-minute reverses, and pieces of work where he says that this is my final seal of approval. Or should we dabble into a game of probabilities and saying that, look, this unpublished piece of work, we'll try and extrapolate it, we'll try and boost his legacy. I know you have the best intentions, you want to make them look better than they probably look. But Brian has also said that there is also a very, very high risk that you may tarnish his reputation. In those kind of instances, we say that let us, at the minimum or at the maximum, protect his legacy as it is. Let him be defined by the completed pieces of work during his lifetime. This debate, I'm sorry, Arina, but it's difficult to say in this debate because there are so many red herrings that happen in this debate, right? They say things like, can assets be transferred? Are we debating about intellectual property versus physical property? Those are not concerns of this debate, right? The main concern of this debate is as an individual during my lifetime, can I say that I do not want to publish a piece of work? And can I say that I don't want to commercialize it, partake in a transaction, and change a piece of work into a particular piece of asset so that my family members can benefit from it? Those were elements of my speech, never once responded. All their points about the next of kin, I really responded by saying that most of them will be well taken care of. Yes, it's true that some of them may not be that well taken care of. But the most powerful line of my logic, which he did not deal with, is this. Is that individuals during a lifetime can choose that I don't want to commercialize a piece of work. I may be supremely talented, but because of my legacy, because of my reputation, I would say I don't want to publish. And the next of kin can't do anything about it. And in this particular instance, if this is a principle that we adhere during his lifetime, why on earth do we make the opposite presumption when he's dead? And then move on to the second tier, which is the whole concept of why is it that complete consent is explicit during our lifetime and yet implicit in once you are dead. Look, the reason why they want to dabble with this is because they know that during a lifetime, people make calculuses, make decisions based on a particular set of calculus. Natalie's speech, like for example, they are more likely to be perfectionists. They are more likely to do things that we don't understand, but we benefit greatly from because they maintain such a high standard, we benefited from it. But it's in their case, they want to change that particular calculus. They change it to making consent implicit. Because now we make assumptions on their behalf. Now we say that it's okay, I'm public piece of work, but you have such a good reputation. We do it on your behalf out there. But at the end of the day, we will balance it out there. If we respect it during his life, he made choices based on particular calculuses. Why is it that we can just reverse it because he's dead and he's unable to fight for his particular right? But the last thing, guys, look, society regard these pieces of work very, very differently from biographies out there. That was a POI that I raised. They tried to demo it again, but wasn't very good in the struggle with this. Why is this the case? Because you can say that, oh, society will regard this compilation with a pinch of salt. But then in the previous speaker, you told us that this is the best opportunity for you to fix the legacy out there. Clearly, there's a tension over here, right? Do people take it seriously or people don't take it seriously? But we are the ones with a more consistent stance and say that people are probably going to over-romanticize. People are going to play with the intrigue that's involved in these particular instances, which probably means that the original intentions will be overshadowed. It probably means that there's a high chance that he will lose sense of control of it. It probably means that all the so-called public interest here you are protecting will be overshadowed because we are still stuck in the preponderance of this artificial legacy of these individuals.
Thank you very much.
Cheers, guys.